boy was 7 years old when he said it. I was standing in the doorway of my son's kitchen, holding a dish towel I had folded 3 times into a perfect rectangle, when my grandson looked up from his homework and asked his father why Grandpa never smiled. My son, Marcus, glanced at me with something between apology and recognition, then told the boy to focus on his fractions. But the damage was already visible. The child's face had that pinched look children get when they know they have said something true that adults wish they had not. I set the towel on the counter and walked to the living room without comment. Behind me, I heard Marcus tell his son that some people just showed love differently, and the phrase landed in my chest like an old key turning in a lock I had welded shut decades ago. I had heard those exact words before. Marcus had been 9 when he first said I was cold. His mother was still alive then, and she had pulled him aside after dinner to explain that Daddy loved him even if he did not say it the way other fathers did. I had been standing in almost the same position, in a different kitchen, holding a dish towel folded into a rectangle. The symmetry made my jaw tight. That night I drove home in silence. My house sat at the end of a gravel lane where the streetlights gave up. I unlocked the front door and stood in the entryway long enough for the motion sensor to time out and leave me in darkness. Then I walked to the den and sat in the leather chair by the window. Outside, the wind moved through the pines with a sound like distant water. I did not turn on a lamp. I sat with my hands on the armrests and let the cold fact settle into my bones. My son had become me, and his son had noticed. I am 68 years old. I worked 42 years in civil engineering, most of it in highway projects that required precision and silence. I learned early that showing uncertainty was expensive, and that men who hesitated lost contracts. I built that discipline into my body the way other men build muscle. I did not yell. I did not plead. I solved problems with methodical attention and expected others to do the same. My wife understood this. She translated me to our son when translation was needed. When she died 6 years ago, Marcus gave a short eulogy that praised her patience and left me unnamed except as her husband. I did not take offense. It was accurate. Marcus had spent his teenage years pushing against me. He accused me of caring more about drainage coefficients than his soccer games. He said I loved systems more than people. When he went to college, he studied social work, a field I respected but did not understand, and he married a woman who spoke in long paragraphs full of feelings and eye contact. They had one child, the boy who now sat at their kitchen table asking why his grandfather did not smile. I had assumed Marcus would raise him differently. I had assumed the cycle would break on its own. It had not. 3 weeks after that kitchen moment, I received a call from Marcus's wife, Teresa. Her voice was tight in the way that meant she had been crying but was trying to hold it together. She asked if I could watch my grandson for the afternoon because she and Marcus needed to talk. I said yes, and wrote the time in my planner. When I arrived at their house, the boy was sitting on the front steps with a backpack full of books. His face was blank in a way that reminded me of Marcus at that age. Teresa handed me a list of snack preferences and emergency contacts, then touched my shoulder and said, "Thank you," in a voice that carried more weight than gratitude. I nodded and guided the boy to my truck. We drove to my house without speaking. He looked out the window at the passing fields and subdivisions, his hands folded in his lap like a small businessman waiting for a meeting to start. When we arrived, I unlocked the door and asked if he wanted a snack. He said no thank you, and asked if he could do his homework at the dining table. I said yes and brought him a glass of water. He opened his math book and began working through long division with a pencil he gripped too tightly. I sat across from him with the newspaper and pretended to read. After 20 minutes, he looked up and asked me a question about remainders. I explained the concept using the language I would use with an adult. He listened without interrupting, then nodded and returned to his work. When he finished the page, he closed the book and stared at the table. I folded the newspaper and waited. "Dad says I need to try harder," he said finally. "At math?" "At everything." His voice was flat. "He says I don't focus enough. He says I waste time." I recognized the phrasing. I had said similar things to Marcus when he was young. I had believed I was teaching him discipline. Now I understood I had been teaching him to distrust his own attention. "What do you think?" I asked. The boy looked at me with surprise. It was a small thing, but I saw it. He had not expected the question. "I think I try," he said quietly. "But it's never enough." I nodded. I did not offer reassurance or contradiction. I let the statement sit between us like a piece of evidence. Then I asked if he wanted to see the garden. He said yes, and we went outside. My garden is small and functional. I grow tomatoes, peppers, beans, and herbs in raised beds I built from cedar. I do not grow flowers. I had always believed flowers were decorative and decoration was wasteful. But as I walked the boy through the rows, pointing out which plants needed staking and which needed more water, I noticed he kept glancing at the neighbor's yard, where wild poppies grew in a tangle along the fence. He asked what they were called. I told him. He asked if they were hard to grow. I said no, they grew on their own. He asked why I did not have any. I did not have an answer. That night after Teresa picked him up, I sat in the den and thought about the question. I thought about all the things I had built and maintained, and all the things I had considered unnecessary. I thought about the symmetry between Marcus's childhood and his son's. I thought about the moment in the kitchen when the boy had asked why I never smiled, and how Marcus had responded with the same apology my wife used to offer on my behalf. I opened my laptop and searched for Marcus's name in my email archives. I found 2 years of messages, most of them logistical. Confirmation of holiday visits. Updates on the boys' school enrollment. A request for a loan when their furnace failed, which I had approved with a repayment schedule that Marcus had followed exactly. There was no anger in the correspondence. There was no warmth either. It was a ledger of transactions between two people who shared DNA and little else. I closed the laptop and walked to the hallway closet where I kept old photo albums. I had not opened them since my wife's funeral. I carried 3 albums to the kitchen table and began turning pages. There were pictures of Marcus as a baby, as a toddler, as a boy holding a fish he had caught on a trip I barely remembered. In most of the photos, I was absent. In the few where I appeared, I stood at the edge of the frame with my hands in my pockets, watching. There was one picture that stopped me. Marcus was maybe 6 years old, standing beside a snowman we had built in the front yard. He was grinning with his whole face, his cheeks red from cold, his mittens caked with ice. I stood next to him with one hand on his shoulder. I was not smiling, but my hand was there. I stared at that hand for a long time. I tried to remember what I had been thinking in that moment. I tried to remember if I had felt pride or affection or anything other than the cold. I could not remember. I closed the album and sat in the silence. The refrigerator hummed. The clock above the stove ticked. Outside, a car passed on the distant road, its headlights sweeping briefly across the kitchen wall. I felt something shift in my chest, a loosening I had not expected. It was not grief exactly. It was more like the feeling of setting down a weight I had carried so long I had forgotten it was there. The next morning I called Marcus. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice cautious. I asked if we could meet for coffee. There was a pause. Then he said yes and suggested a place near his office. I said I would be there at 10. The coffee shop was loud and crowded with people hunched over laptops. I arrived 5 minutes early and took a table in the back corner. When Marcus walked in, he looked around until he spotted me, then approached with the careful posture of someone entering a negotiation. He sat down and ordered black coffee when the server came by. I ordered the same. "Is everything okay?" he asked. "Yes," I said. I wanted to talk. He waited. I had not prepared a script. I had only prepared to be present. "Your son asked me a question," I said. "About flowers." Marcus frowned. "Flowers?" He wanted to know why I don't grow any. I paused. I didn't have a good answer. He looked at me with confusion that slowly shifted into something else. Wariness, maybe, or recognition. "I've been thinking about the way I raised you," I continued, "and the way you're raising him." "Dad," his voice was tight. "If this is about what he said in the kitchen, he's just a kid. He didn't mean anything by it." "I know what he meant," I said. "He meant the same thing you meant when you were 9. The words hung between us. Marcus's jaw tightened. He looked away, then back at me. You want to do this now? He asked. After 30 years? Yes. He exhaled slowly. Okay. Fine. You were cold. You were distant. You cared about your work and your systems, and you barely noticed I existed unless I was failing at something. Is that what you want to hear? I want to hear if you think you're different. The question landed hard. I saw it in his face. He opened his mouth, closed it, then looked down at his coffee. I'm trying to be different, he said finally. How? I talk to him. I'm involved in his school. I show up. And when you show up, what does he see? Marcus's hands tightened around his cup. He sees his father. Does he see someone who smiles? Does he see someone who asks what he thinks instead of telling him what to do? I'm teaching him discipline. I'm teaching him to be responsible. That's what I thought I was doing. The silence stretched. Around us, the coffee shop noise continued, the hiss of espresso machines and the murmur of conversations that had nothing to do with us. Marcus stared at his cup, his expression unreadable. You don't get to do this, he said finally. His voice was low but sharp. You don't get to show up 30 years later and criticize how I'm raising my kid. I'm not criticizing, I'm asking you to look. At what? At the pattern. He met my eyes then, and I saw something break loose in his face. Not anger, something deeper. He looked at me the way someone looks at a mirror they have been avoiding. I don't want to be like you, he said quietly. I know. I've spent my whole life trying not to be like you. I know. And you're telling me I failed. I'm telling you I failed, I said. And I'm asking if we can stop failing together. Marcus leaned back in his chair. He rubbed his face with both hands, then looked at the ceiling. When he looked back at me, his eyes were red. What do you want from me? He asked. I want to know my grandson, I said, and I want him to know me. He does know you. No. He knows the same person you knew, the person who folds towels and solves problems and doesn't smile. I want him to know something else. What else is there? The question was not hostile. It was genuine, and it told me everything I needed to know about how completely I had hidden myself. I don't know yet, I said, but I'd like to find out. We sat in silence for a long time. The server came by and refilled our cups without asking. Marcus drank his coffee slowly, thinking. Finally he said, Teresa wants me to go to therapy. Are you going to? I don't know. Maybe. He paused. She says I'm shut down. She says our son is starting to shut down too. Is he? Yeah. Marcus's voice was tired. He is. I nodded. I thought about the boy at my dining table, his hands folded like a businessman, his voice flat when he said he tried, but it was never enough. I thought about Marcus at 9, standing in the kitchen asking why I never came to his games. I thought about myself at 30, believing that showing emotion was weakness, and that love was something you proved through provision. I'll go with you, I said. Marcus looked up sharply. What? To therapy, if you want. I'll go with you. Why would you do that? Because I want to understand what I did, and I want to help you not do it. He stared at me like I had spoken a language he did not know. Then something in his face softened. Not forgiveness, not yet. But an opening. Okay, he said. Okay. We finished our coffee and made a plan. Marcus would find a therapist, and I would come to the first session. We would start there and see what happened. When we stood to leave, Marcus hesitated, then reached out and touched my shoulder. It was brief, awkward, but it was there. I nodded and we walked out into the parking lot where the morning sun was bright and hard. Over the next 3 weeks, I made changes. Small things first. I planted poppies along my fence line, the wild kind that needed no maintenance. I bought a notebook and started writing down memories from Marcus's childhood, the ones I could retrieve from the fog of my own emotional distance. Most of the entries were short. Baseball game, 4th grade. He hit a double. I left in the 6th inning to check on a work site. Christmas morning, age 7. He asked if I liked the drawing he made me. I said it was nice and filed it in a drawer. The act of writing these things down was harder than I expected. Each memory was a small confession. I did not write them to punish myself. I wrote them to see clearly what I had done and what it had cost. On a Saturday afternoon, I called Marcus and asked if I could take my grandson for the day. He was surprised, but agreed. I picked the boy up at 9 in the morning. He climbed into my truck with the same careful posture, his hands folded in his lap. "Where are we going?" he asked. "Hardware store first," I said. "Then wherever you want." He looked at me with confusion. "Wherever I want." "Yes." "Why?" "Because I don't know what you like," I said, "and I'd like to find out." We drove to the hardware store where I bought wood and screws and a small handsaw. The boy walked beside me through the aisles, watching as I selected materials. When we got to the checkout, he asked what we were building. "A birdhouse," I said. "Do you have birds in your yard?" "Not yet, but maybe if we build it, they'll come." He thought about this, then nodded. We loaded the materials into the truck and I asked where he wanted to go next. He said he did not know. I asked if he liked books. He said yes. I drove to the library. Inside, I told him he could pick any 3 books he wanted. He looked at me uncertainly, then walked slowly through the children's section. He picked 2 books about space and 1 about dogs. At the checkout, he asked if I wanted to see them. I said yes. He showed me each one, explaining why he had chosen it. I listened without interrupting. When he finished, I asked which one he wanted to read first. "The one about Mars," he said. We checked out the books and drove back to my house. In the workshop, I set up the materials on the workbench and showed him how to measure and mark the wood. He held the tape measure with both hands, his face serious with concentration. When he made a mistake, I showed him how to adjust it without comment on the error. We worked in silence for a while, the only sounds the scratch of pencil on wood and the rasp of the saw. After an hour, we had the basic frame assembled. The boy stepped back and looked at it with something close to pride. I asked if he wanted to take a break. He said yes. We went inside and I made sandwiches while he sat at the kitchen table reading his Mars book. When I brought the plates over, he closed the book and ate without being told to hurry. "Grandpa," he said after a while. "Yes." "Why didn't we do this before?" The question was simple. The answer was not. "Because I didn't know how," I said. He thought about this. "Did you want to?" "Yes, I just didn't know I wanted to." He nodded, like this made sense. Maybe it did. We finished eating and returned to the workshop. By late afternoon, we had a completed birdhouse, rough but functional. The boy held it carefully, turning it to examine all sides. "Can we put it up in your yard?" he asked. "Yes." We found a spot near the poppies, and I mounted the birdhouse on a post I sank into the ground. The boy stood back and watched as I secured it, then asked if birds would really come. "I think so," I said. "If we're patient." He smiled. It was small, but it was there. When Marcus came to pick him up that evening, the boy ran to the truck and pulled him toward the backyard to show him the birdhouse. Marcus followed, glancing at me with an expression I could not quite read. When he saw the birdhouse and the poppies beyond it, he stopped. "You planted flowers," he said. "I did." "Why?" "Your son asked about them." Marcus looked at the birdhouse, then at his son, then at me. He had a good day. So did I. We stood in the yard as the light faded, the 3 of us together in a way we had never quite managed before. The boy chattered about the measurements and the saw and the Mars book. Marcus listened, his hand on his son's shoulder. I watched them both and felt the weight in my chest shift again, lighter now, almost gone. The therapy sessions began 2 weeks later. The therapist was a woman in her 50s with gray hair and a calm manner that reminded me of my wife. She did not push. She asked questions and waited for answers. In the first session, she asked me to describe how I understood love as a child. I said I understood it as provision and protection. She asked if I thought that was enough. I said I used to. She asked what I thought now. I think it's a foundation, I said, but not a house. Marcus was quiet for most of that session. But in the second one, when the therapist asked him what he had wanted from me as a child, he said, "I wanted him to see me." "Did he see you?" she asked. "He saw what I did wrong." I felt the words land. The therapist turned to me. "Is that true?" "Yes," I said. "I saw what needed fixing. I didn't see what was already whole." The room was silent. Marcus looked at his hands. The therapist let the silence sit. "What do you see now?" she asked me. I looked at Marcus. I saw the exhaustion in his face, and the tension in his shoulders, and the way he held himself like a man carrying something too heavy. I saw my son. "I see someone who's trying," I said. "I see someone who cares so much he's afraid of failing." Marcus's throat worked. He did not look up. "And I see someone who doesn't have to do it alone," I said. The therapist nodded. She asked Marcus what he heard. He said he heard me. She asked what he needed. He said he needed to know it was real. Over the next 3 months, we built something neither of us had words for. I started coming to the boys' soccer games and sitting in the bleachers beside Marcus. I learned the names of the other children and waved when they scored. I stopped keeping score and started watching the way the boy moved on the field, the joy in his running. After games, we would get ice cream, the 3 of us, and the boy would replay every moment while Marcus and I listened. I invited them to my house for dinner once a week. I cooked simple meals and let the boy help with preparation. He learned to chop vegetables and season chicken and set the table with care. Teresa came too sometimes and filled the silences with stories about her work and questions about mine. She had a way of drawing people out that I had never learned. I watched how she did it and tried to copy the technique. Marcus and I kept going to therapy. We talked about anger and disappointment and the invisible ways we had hurt each other. We talked about the things I had never said and the things he had stopped hoping to hear. It was hard work, the kind that left me tired in a way I had never been tired from engineering. But it was good work. One evening in October, Marcus called and asked if I wanted to go fishing. We had not fished together since he was a boy. I said yes. We drove to a lake an hour south and rented a small boat. The water was still and gray, the air cool. We paddled out to the middle and cast our lines. For a long time we did not talk. We sat in the boat and watched the water and waited for something to bite. Then Marcus said, "I'm sorry I said you didn't care." "You weren't wrong," I said. "I was wrong about why." I looked at him. He was staring at the water, his lines slack. "I thought you didn't care because you were cold," he said. "But I think you cared so much you didn't know what to do with it, so you turned it into work." I felt something catch in my throat. That's a generous interpretation. Maybe, but I think it's true. He reeled in his line and cast again. I do the same thing. Teresa tells me I love them so hard I'm crushing them. Are you? Yeah, I think I am. We sat with that for a while. A fish jumped in the distance, the splash quiet. Marcus said, "I don't know how to stop." "Neither did I said. "But I'm learning." "How?" "By doing things that don't have a purpose. By planting flowers. By building a birdhouse we don't need. By sitting in a boat and talking instead of fixing." Marcus smiled a little. "Is that what we're doing?" "Yes." "It's nice." "It is." We fished until the sun dropped behind the trees and the air turned cold. We did not catch anything. It did not matter. On the drive back, Marcus asked if I remembered the snowman we built when he was 6. I said I remembered the photo. He said he remembered the day. He said I had helped him lift the head into place and had told him it was a good snowman. He said it was one of the only times he remembered me saying something was good without adding what needed to be better. "I didn't know that mattered," I said. "Everything mattered," Marcus said quietly. "I just didn't know how to tell you." When we got back to his house, the boy was waiting on the porch. He ran down to meet us and asked if we caught anything. Marcus said no, but we had a good time. The boy looked at me and asked if that was true. I said yes. He grinned and took my hand and pulled me inside to show me a drawing he had made of the birdhouse. It was taped to the refrigerator beside his school papers and soccer schedule. That night, I drove home through the dark, my headlights cutting tunnels through the trees. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat for a moment before getting out. The house was dark. The garden was invisible. But I knew the poppies were there, the birdhouse standing watch above them. I knew that in the morning there might be birds. Inside, I made tea and sat in the den. I thought about the boy's question in the kitchen all those weeks ago. Why didn't Grandpa smile? I thought about Marcus's answer, that some people showed love differently. It was still true, but it was not the whole truth. The whole truth was that I had not known how to show love in a way that could be seen. I had not known that love required visibility. I was learning now. The cycle had not broken cleanly. There were still days when Marcus reverted to criticism, and I reverted to silence. There were still moments when the boy looked at his father with the same wary distance I remembered, from Marcus's childhood. But there were other moments, too. Moments when Marcus laughed at his son's jokes. Moments when I sat on the floor and played a board game I did not understand. Moments when the boy climbed into my lap and asked me to read the Mars book again. And I did. And he fell asleep against my chest. Last week I went to another soccer game. The boy scored his first goal. When the ball hit the net, he turned and looked for his father in the stands. Marcus was already on his feet, cheering. Then the boy looked for me. I was standing too, and I was smiling. After the game, the boy ran over, and Marcus lifted him up and spun him around. Then Marcus set him down, and the boy grabbed my hand and asked if I saw the goal. I said I saw it. He asked if it was good. I said it was perfect. He asked if we could get ice cream to celebrate. I said yes. We walked to the parking lot together, the boy between us, holding both our hands. He talked the whole way about the goal and the way the ball felt when he kicked it, and how he wanted to play again tomorrow. Marcus and I caught each other's eye over his head. We did not say anything. We did not need to. At the ice cream shop, the boy ordered chocolate, and Marcus ordered vanilla, and I ordered the same. We sat at a picnic table outside and ate in the late afternoon sun. The boy got ice cream on his shirt, and Marcus wiped it off without commenting on the mess. I watched them and thought about all the years I had missed and all the years still ahead. "Grandpa," the boy said suddenly, "are you happy?" The question surprised me. I thought about it. I thought about the birdhouse and the poppies and the fishing trip and this moment right here. The three of us eating ice cream while the light slanted gold across the parking lot. "Yes," I said. "I am." He nodded like this was important information. Then he asked if we could go see if any birds had moved into the birdhouse yet. I said yes. Marcus said he would come too. We finished our ice cream and drove to my house. In the backyard, we stood quietly and watched the birdhouse. After a few minutes, a small brown bird landed on the perch. It hopped inside, then out, then in again. The boy grabbed my arm and whispered that a bird was really there. I whispered back that it was. Marcus put his hand on his son's shoulder and we stood together, 3 generations watching a bird explore a house we had built. When the bird flew away, the boy asked if it would come back. I said I thought it would. He asked how I knew. I said I did not know, but I hoped, and sometimes hoping was enough. We went inside and I made dinner. The boy set the table and Marcus helped me chop vegetables, and we worked together in the small kitchen without getting in each other's way. We ate slowly and talked about nothing important. After dinner, the boy asked if he could read his Mars book in the den. I said yes. He curled up in the leather chair by the window, the same chair where I had sat in, darkness months ago, and read with a small lamp casting warm light over the pages. Marcus and I cleaned up. At the sink, washing dishes, he said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For trying." I dried a plate and set it in the rack. I should have tried 30 years ago. Maybe. But you're trying now. That's what matters. I wanted to say more. I wanted to tell him I was sorry for every game I missed, and every moment I stood at the edge of the frame. I wanted to tell him I loved him in a way I could not have articulated when he was young, and maybe still could not articulate now. But the words felt too large and clumsy, so instead I just nodded and kept washing dishes. When we finished, Marcus called his son and said it was time to go home. The boy protested that he was not done with his chapter. Marcus said he could bring the book home and finish it there. The boy agreed and carefully marked his place. He hugged me goodbye, his arms tight around my waist. Then he ran out to the truck. Marcus and I stood in the doorway. He looked at me with an expression I had seen before but never understood. Now I understood. It was hope mixed with caution, the look of someone who has been hurt but is willing to try again. "Same time next week?" he asked. "Yes." "Good." He walked to his truck and I stood in the doorway and watched them drive away, the taillights disappearing down the gravel lane. When they were gone, I went back inside and walked through the house, turning off lights. In the den, I sat in the leather chair, still warm from the boy, and looked out at the dark yard. I could not see the birdhouse or the poppies, but I knew they were there. I thought about the cycle that had brought us to this moment. I thought about how I had raised a son who swore he would be different, and how he had become the same. I thought about how his son had noticed, and how that noticing had forced us all to look clearly at what we were doing. I thought about how breaking a cycle required more than intention. It required visibility and vulnerability, and the willingness to build something new from the ruins of what we had been. I did not know if we would succeed. I did not know if the changes we were making would hold, or if we would slip back into old patterns when things got hard. But I knew we were trying. And I knew that trying together was different from trying alone. Outside, the wind moved through the pines. Somewhere in the darkness, a bird might be settling into the house we built, testing it for safety and warmth. Or maybe the bird had moved on. It did not matter. We had built the house. We had planted the flowers. We had made space for something to grow. That was enough. I sat in the chair until the cold drove me to bed. I climbed the stairs slowly, my hand on the railing, my body tired in the good way that comes from work that matters. In my room, I undressed and lay down in the dark. Through the window, I could see stars scattered across the sky, distant and clear. I thought about my grandson's question. "Are you happy?" I had said yes, and it was true. Not the happiness of achievement or completion, but the happiness of beginning. The happiness of knowing that there was still time to build something better. The happiness of not being alone in the work. I closed my eyes and let sleep come. In the morning there would be birds, or there would not be. Either way, I would check, and if the boy called, I would answer. And if Marcus needed help, I would show up. Not because I had solved everything or become someone new, but because I was learning to be present in a way I had never learned before. The cycle was not broken, but it was bending, and that was enough.